Hey everybody, Jamie Holroyd here. In this video I'd like to discuss a few different pieces of musical gear that I've had over the years. I've owned, bought and sold, which I didn't necessarily get along with and I've moved on for some reason or another. So let's get on with the list. If you're new around here and you'd like to learn jazz guitar, then please check out my free beginner jazz guitar ebook, which tells you how to learn jazz guitar in a structured and methodical way. Let's get into the video. The first piece of gear that I did not bond with was the Gurdin 5th Avenue guitar. For those of you that don't know, the Gurdin 5th Avenue is basically an ES-125 style archtop with a single P90 made by the company Gurdin in Canada. So there were three main reasons why I didn't bond with the Gurdin 5th Avenue and why I personally would not recommend it as a beginner archtop. The first was that the radius of the guitar neck was very, very flat. Now, usually I'm not overly picky about radius and neck shapes and sizes and things like that, but this one was really flat and it actually made my hand feel quite uncomfortable after 20 or 30 minutes playing it. So most guitar necks that I like tend to have a bit more of a curve on them, which makes them much more comfortable than the Gurdin 5th Avenue. The second reason why I did not bond with the Gurdin 5th Avenue was that the neck pickup had a very high output. It would break up very easily, there wasn't much clean room. Not ideal if you're looking to play jazz. It might have been better for things like blues or jump blues, but not really jazz guitar tones. The last reason was that the Gurdin 5th Avenue never really played that great. I've owned two of them and tried a couple, but they never played that fast and I never felt like I could keep playing it, and I always tended to want to put the guitar down after playing it for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. The next piece of musical gear that I didn't bond with was my 1970s blonde Telecaster. Now, I always wanted to like this guitar. It looked great. I'll put a picture on the screen and I think that you'll agree that this looked the part. It had been nicely worn in, it had a nice natural finish that had yellowed over time. Really liked the look of the guitar, and even the sound of the guitar was great. I did a shootout with that guitar against a modern Fender Telecaster and everyone in the comment section said that the older Telecaster sounded better. Having said all that, there was a few reasons why I didn't really get on with it. I think the first one was the microphonic pickups. Now, anybody that's ever played an old Fender guitar will know all about those. As far as I'm aware, I think that the microphonic pickups started coming into play late 60s, early 70s, and what that means is that the pickups were unwaxed. Now, if you've got an unwaxed pickup, if you ever touch the pickup with the pick, it makes a clicking sound, which if you don't play above the pickup like what I do, then that's not ever going to be a problem for you. But because when I play jazz, I like to pick above the neck pickup, I kept getting these clicky sounds all the time. Now, you can obviously get pickups waxed, but then there's this entire debate of does it affect the tone, and for me I just got in analysis paralysis with that, so that was one thing that I never did with the Telecaster. Every time I used it for a recording or a gig or something like that, the clicking sound would not really be preferential. Another reason why I decided to sell that Telecaster was that the neck got a little cramped as you got further up. Now, this wasn't small or skinny by any stretch of the imagination, but around the time I had that 70s Telecaster, I had a few new Telecasters, recent Telecasters, which had much fatter necks, and I much prefer the feel of a fatter neck on a Telecaster for some reason. Other guitars, I'm not so picky, but on a Telecaster, I like a big neck. The next guitar on the list is a Yamaha NTX1. This was a nylon string guitar that I was really excited for. I'd always wanted a good nylon string guitar and I'd read a lot of good things about these. So at the time, you couldn't actually get any of these guitars. This was during the pandemic when things were out of stock, so I pre-ordered one and waited to get one. And I remember when the guitar came, I unboxed it, started playing it, and straight away the sound was very, very underwhelming. It didn't play great. This was a brand new guitar as well. It wasn't tremendously expensive. I think I paid about £350, £400 for it brand new or something like that, but I was very, very underwhelmed. I have tried some other acoustic guitars in that price range that played and sounded great. So for me, as much as I wanted a good nylon string guitar, I didn't really want to have to go through a setup to try and like a guitar, and I didn't like the sound either. So luckily I bought that new, so I just returned that to the store which I bought it from. The next two pieces of gear that I'm going to tell you about are guitar amplifiers. Now, the first one I was very twisted about including on the list because I kind of love this amp, but equally I didn't bond with it for one key reason. So the amp that I'm talking about is a Fender Blues Junior, specifically the ones that are from the Mark 1 to Mark 3 period. Now, let me get this straight. If you are a gigging musician and you want to use this amp for playing, and that is the majority of what you do, playing and rehearsals, this is a great amp. You will not be disappointed with this, which is why I always include this amp on a list of amp recommendations. However, if you're in the same situation as me, where you are teaching and recording, this amp might not be for you, because all the Fender Blues and Pro Juniors have what's called a hiss. And if you've got it on, it's like I said, it's not noticeable if you're gigging, but if you're teaching and recording, for me, it got very annoying, and it was actually a deal breaker in the end. I just didn't want to put an amp on and have this hiss every time I was teaching and recording, so that's why it had to go. Great amp, but unfortunately that was a problem that I couldn't get around. The next amp on the list was a Roland Cube, and to be very clear about this, the Roland Cube that I'm talking about is the orange Roland Cube, which came around in the late 70s and was manufactured throughout the 80s, the orange Cube. Now, I have wanted to try one of these amps for a long time. For those of you that don't know, a few jazz guitar players used them around that time. So Ed Bickett used a Roland Cube, an orange one, as did Jimmy Rainey, and I think Louis Stewart might have used one as well. So they are, and don't get me wrong, like the Blues Junior, I did like these amps to a degree, and when I first got it I really liked it and I did use it, and I was glad even now to have owned it for a while and do a bit of recording with it. The main problem with this amp was that it was very heavy. So I had the 60 watt Cube, which was a heavy amp for the amount of volume you got, and like many amps from that time period, the size and weight didn't really equivalent to that much more volume. So if you're going to have an amp that's heavy, for me, I want it to be loud and clear. So that was kind of a deal breaker there. The sound was good, but it was kind of hit or miss. Sometimes when I plugged it on, when I turned it on, I could get a really good sound that I was really happy with, but it was kind of funny in how you EQ'd that amp. So if you've got an orange Roland Cube, I found that you couldn't really have any of the EQ above 2 or 3. You had to have the bass, middle and treble all fairly low in the amp. As soon as you started to crank some of these up, the sound of the amp seems to be terrible, to be honest with you. So although that was a fun amp, a good amp for a while, for me it was not something I really bonded with and wanted to keep in my collection for the long term. The last piece of gear that I'd like to share with you was the Boss ME50 guitar effects pedal. Now this one I did own for quite a few years, and I used it occasionally on function gigs and maybe sometimes for teaching. To be honest, this is a good pedal, and if you are looking for a cheap kind of guitar pedal to have some fairly decent sounds, I think that this might be the one for you. But ultimately, especially in 2022, which is when I'm recording this video, that pedal was really just a product of its time. You know, things have come a long way since that was released, probably in the early 90s. I mean, it had a fairly good distortion and good reverb and things like that, but it was noisy, the noise suppression wasn't very good, things like the built-in wah weren't very good, it was quite big, quite cumbersome. All things which were just great for the time. If you look around in that time period, there wasn't really much competition, but in 2022 I've just found much better alternatives for both recording and effects pedals, so that's why that piece had to go. Alright, so that concludes my list of gear I did not bond with. What I'd like to know is, what pieces of musical gear did you not bond with? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below, and subscribe to this channel if you want more videos like this. Thanks for watching.